Hi everyone, my name is Charlie and this is from the mic stand. I suppose I should have given my official poet title, which is Charles Heathcote, and today I am here to share some poetry from my debut collection, Shepherd's Delight, which is a collection that is filled with some of the most depraved moments I have ever experienced as the son of a farmer who did not wish to farm himself. It has been in my family for generations, going back, I don't know how many ancestors. There's even a bit of adoption in there, and still, I did not wish to farm for no other reason than I just don't like mud. I do own a pair of Wellingtons. I got them in about 2020, and my brother ran away to Scotland with them. There are worse things that you can run away to Scotland with. But this collection here is basically surrounding my family history and all of the myths that come to surround familial history going back perhaps 100 years or so. And this collection really came about because I wrote one poem all about the last day that I went to help my father with the farming. It was lambing time about 2007, and the events of that day haunted me so much that I decided I would never go back. And I will just say that this collection has been known to put people off their food, so I won't apologise for that. You get what you came for. And this is called Ovine Gynecology. The U has its readout. Dad says to press the hot mass of pink flesh back inside. My fingers squelch against the steaming conical, force each fold of rigid flesh into the sheep's darkness. Dizzy from bending down for so long, I wonder when I will get to wash my hands or if lunch will be eaten with the worry of E. coli. Dad stitches a truss to her back end, both farmer and physician, yet still she complains, bleats and heaves herself as though we've inconvenienced her. This cold April morning, where the white balance is off and sheep hide in bushes, birth lambs with crowns of gorse, and all sound leaves the world save for lowing and cackles. This is the real beauty of spring. The sheep rule this empire where crows bide their time as lambs frolic, a clan of wool trailing prolapses that it is our penance to fix. And you might be able to tell from that just exactly why I decided farming wasn't for me. If it wasn't for sheep's prolapsed vaginas, then it was all the other stuff that you would find. But as I say, this collection also deals with a lot of my family's history. And one story that always comes back and has been changed a few times is to do with my grandfather, who I don't know much about really, but he apparently was the butcher's boy about 70 years ago, maybe 90 years ago now. I always forget how old I am. Um, so we'll go to that one next. A nice little prosaic poem, pastoral really, that doesn't involve any massacring of animals, which is unusual for this collection. And it's called The Butcher's Boy. The butcher's boy rides his bicycle through Bollington. He brings cuts of meat in brown paper packages, knocks at the door of Mrs. Hollinshead. She has a craving for proper pork sausages. The butcher's boy rides his bicycle through Bollington. Not that he wants to, but it pays good wages. He wants to roam mild moors, shepherd sheep, to comb the woods alongside his collie. The butcher's boy is tossed from his bicycle in Bollington when a tractor passes by and knocks him into a verge. He has scrapes on his hands, smashes his collarbone, and the driver just laughs as he heads back to the hills. The boy brings his bicycle back to the butcher, scowls his way past a queue of mad customers, tells the butcher to sod his black pudding and keep the bike, he can deliver his own bloody tripe. And from there, I thought to share a nice little story from childhood. Not my childhood, mind you. You know, it wasn't that long ago in the grand scheme of things, was the 1990s. No, I thought to be really kind to you. And what to do is share a story from my father. Now, this is from 1964, so I do think that the statute of limitations has been exhausted by now, because he's very worried that should I read this poem, he could end up in prison. And say, you know, chance would be a fine thing, and he already did that in about 1976, so he can't blame me. However, this was a story that he first revealed to me upon my grandmother's death about 6 years ago. And I thought, well, it has to go in the collection just to show exactly what the childhood of a farmer is like. And one of the reasons I could never do it. I mean, look at these hands. They're just too clean to be a farmer. And this is called Numeracy Lessons. He learns to count at Longclough, drowning kittens in a water bowser, a favour to his mother. If there are any cats left in the yard when I get home, you're in for a clout. He hangs them on the clothesline, dripping onto the dry stone. The dogs worry at the brittle kitten carcasses. His mum returns on the Winkle bus, says she was only messing. I know, it's a bit tough to think about all those drowned kittens. But, you know, it does go on. And this next one is another tale of childhood, but is about my nephew. And a few years ago now, my brother decided that he was going to take a job in Northumberland on an estate there. And my nephew was only 4 at the time. And I hadn't really realised how feral he was going to become, having moved from Cheshire to Northumberland, until I heard just what he had said to one of his teachers, which was, "No, Mrs. Spiller, I don't need to read and write. I'm not going to become a reader. I'm going to be a farmer." And that inspired this poem, which was the latest from my nephew. He is the opposite of me. Loud, gregarious, will play in mud, a piglet having fun. He loves the chickens I call devils, holds them to his chest, buries his face in the feathers on their necks. There is no silence about him, no whispers or whimpers, murmurs or sighs. He is all bangs and roars, a firework in child form. He was back then. Now he's a bit more feral, which just goes to show that people shouldn't live in the wilds for too long. And if they do, they shouldn't be allowed back into polite society. Where shall we go next? I had an idea, you know, before all this started, and then I just thought, you know, childhood. It's always good to talk about the childhood before we get into, you know, more unsavoury exploits. Now, you might remember me saying, since it's not that long ago, that I do have a pair of Wellington boots that is currently in Scotland. But prior to that, we used to just share Wellingtons amongst ourselves at home. Whoever got there first wore them. And prior to that, as a child, because we did spend a lot of time going to my grandparents' farm, there were more cases for wearing wellies. And this is one such event in which, well, it's a very sad story of a lost Wellington boot, is this. You might need your handkerchiefs ready. It's called Marooned. They've tarmacked the drive where we once squelched through mud that wrapped around our knees, held tight as we struggled to lift our feet. Wellington booted, weighed down, waiting for Dad to heft us out, ferry us to a shore of stone. He saved the youngest first. I, the eldest, stuck fast, concreted in almost, toes fixed, twitched as a chill wind taunted me, whispered down my neck that I would never be free. Meanwhile, Dad ambled to save us, one by one, tested the elastic of time. When my turn arrived, he heaved. Hands dug beneath my armpits, but the mud held firm. I was bogged. Dad dragged me upwards. My feet birthed from my wellies, and I clung tight like a shipwrecked passenger to a wardrobe door. The chill wind bit my ankles. Threatened next time. I wonder if they salvaged my wellies before laying the drive, or if firm rubber stands immured beneath the tarmac. And that drive was actually tarmacked over after we no longer had the farm. And this was up the Cat and Fiddle Road. And it's one of those places that always sticks in your mind because it was one of those places that you spent a lot of time forming as a person. And that was Longclough Farm, which is up the Cat and Fiddle Road. But the first time I wrote about it was for a poetry prompt to do with places and how after about 20 years this has become a place I hadn't really thought about much until this event happened, which I suppose was really only 10 years since we'd lost it. And so this is entitled Longclough. We drive up the Cat and Fiddle to a stone farm track the old fellow won't tarmac, so that the Land Rover jolts, clatters, sprays pebbles at the paintwork. We cross the fields, grass as pale as ashes. Thin black reeds grope from beneath the earth, damned demons pleading for salvation, reaching towards a sky full of clouds mist white, where buzzards dance with crows, fight with gulls for dominance, for the slim pickings of a fresh dead lamb. Moles poke fun at us, poke noses from their hills, the ultimate kamikaze mission. If the birds don't get them, Dad will. And rabbits dig their holes beside badger sets. Their pockmarks and craters are acne scars upon this prehistoric skin. A chimney smokes up ahead. Perhaps Nana Alice is burning a tree again, its trunk filling the living room. There are no fire hazards in Macclesfield Forest. We reach the swamp, a farmyard of knee-deep mud where old cars go to die, their parts Frankensteined onto other faulty machines. The thick stench of cow muck crams itself down our throats as we enter the shipping, the last leg of this quest. Through darkness, where the shadows of old equipment spread fear, pace quickens at the sight of a scythe. Strange to think that I will no longer make this journey, that the farm is not ours, it's somebody else's dream up in flames. And I think from there, we're gonna move a little. We're going to go to a poem where somebody wondered whether I might just have shares in Land Rover for the number of times they get mentioned in this poetry collection. To a little story that is the title poem of the collection, Shepherd's Delight. And because my father rented a field where he kept some sheep. And one day, it was probably evening, it's getting pretty late, maybe 11 o'clock at night, and the landlord spotted a Land Rover in the field that he knew shouldn't be there. And so he gets his torch out and he creeps along the field. And, well, it turned out it wasn't sheep rustlers at all, but a young courting couple. And that, well, let's just say that did cause the gear stick to subside for that poor young man. So I decided I'd reimagine things as if he'd actually managed to fulfill what he'd gone to me dad's field to fulfill. This is Shepherd's Delight. He's barely 17. Got a new licence in his pocket, sweaty palms on the steering wheel of the clapped-out Land Rover he's borrowed from his father. There's a stink of haylage and wet dog that he's tried to cover up with Link's dark temptation, but he swears the stench still lingers. And he wonders what she's thinking, in the passenger seat, dressed for a trip to the cinema. Instead, they're at the top of Blaze Hill, stargazing, waiting for the sun to rise. She makes the first move. unfurls his hands, teaches him to steer. And from there, we're going to have a tiny bit of fun, just a little bit of fun, with a poem that makes absolutely, utterly no sense at all. And sometimes I've wanted to blame on taking an antihistamine with a cup of coffee because I don't know why this poem exists. But I was thinking about that film, Babe, Pig in the City. And I wondered how different it would have been if Mrs. Oggett had become a burlesque performer. It makes no sense. But here it is. This is Mrs. Hoggett's career move. Officially, she performs burlesque, struts on stage untying her apron strings as the audience caterwaul. She sachets to the songs of the Wurzels, slowly slips from her Wellington boots while they make promises of combine harvesters, arches her toes with their fresh pedicure, nail polish red as pig's blood, aprons removed to reveal pheasant feathers covering her unmentionables. There are wolf whistles, and she grins, proud that she was never ticklish. She sways beneath the stage lights, purses her lips as seductively as any sow over a boar, and gently, tentatively reaches for her left breast. She has been lambing sheep for years. She knows how to build anticipation. She discards the feathers one by one, unveils her pierced nipples, each adorned with a lucky rabbit's foot. The song builds to a crescendo and the audience are over-eager. She reaches below her belly button, tears away the final feathers and twirls, swings her hips from left to right, bounces the foxtail that hides her behind. Once the music ends and the lights dim, the crowds go home and she's alone with a photograph of the farm she longs to save. She dreams of when she can do it again. And then I think I will do this poem. The one that my brother don't like because it talks about him a bit. But it also kind of references what I've talked about already, which is the strange dichotomy of being a farmer and being a child and then growing up and seeing some more aggressive things that we don't usually expect to see. And, well, this one was one of the ones that when I wrote it, I knew that I was putting a poetry collection together. It wasn't just this thing that I was doing in occasional spare time when I had nothing better to do. There was something forming behind the scenes, and it became this thing of almost explaining away my family and understanding the farming aspect a bit more. And that's where hay fever came from, really. He puts the fox out of its misery. A bullet to the skull. Silence. Had been ploughing the field, unsuspecting, unaware, until high-pitched keen. Ballow. Wail. Merciless mewling tearing through the quiet, and a mangled fox, back legs torn off, shredded. Gelatinous clods of blood and tissue left for the crows to pick at, sheep to sample. It tried to drag itself away, still sure it would survive as nothing more than torso. When he tells me what he has done, I wonder at this man, my brother, the child who threw cups during hide and seek. Split lip, iron taste, laughter sharp as tin. How he always had a wildness. Wandered around the house naked and feral, refused offers of underwear and socks. His clothes were a prison. He longs for days outside acquiring filth, badges of honour, pockets filled with hay, straw, bale string, sees the world in black and white, once took a pocket knife to school to kill a lad who wronged him. Perhaps it's too much time spent around dogs. Had worms at 6, brought home fleas, will drop his trowels and urinate whenever he feels the need. He's always had the hunter inside, wishes to sample human flesh just to know the taste, questions if we're all pigs who managed to escape. Shoots pigeons and crows, moles and badgers, and now this fox. Scrabbles across the ploughed field. Beribboned intestines trail behind her. He raises the gun, calls it mercy. I think from there, we'll avoid the death of any more animals in tonight's reading. And we'll go for one which was a bit inspired by the Wurzels and also inspired with Ernie driving his fastest milk cart in the West. And if you've heard this before, just pretend you haven't. It's called Bury Me in My Wellies. I've had this pain in me side for a while that twists me guts like twine. I planned to see the doctor, but I couldn't find the time. Had sheep in need of worming, foot rotting, that sort of thing. I could have asked me son, but he's got no time for farming. Well, now it's 2 a.m, and me side it don't half hurt. Like I've just been gored by a Jacob's horn, and it's torn right through me shirt. I've called the paramedics. They say they're on their way, but if they don't get here in time, I've just one thing to say. Bury me in my wellies. They're all I've ever known. And if there is an afterlife, I want to feel at home. The souls that need a shepherd, and they will flock to me. So bury me in my wellies, beneath the old yew tree. The pain isn't going anywhere, but I've made it down the stairs. Hopefully no one minds finding me in me underwear. I'll put on me coat and wellies and switch on the porch light. If it's my time for dying, then I'm gonna do it right. Well, the paramedics are here in 10 and they're prodding me like Play-Doh, asking questions, attaching machines as me son arrives for the floor show. He's by me side with his fretting. He's worried and he's stressed. So I take his hand in mine and I make me final request. You can see where this is going. Bury me in my wellies. They're all I've ever known. And if there is an afterlife, I want to feel at home. The souls that need a shepherd, and they will flock to me. So bury me in my wellies, beneath the old yew tree. I'm in the ambulance in quick sticks and rush down to A&E. They say it's an hiatus hernia, which I thought were a fallacy. They take me off to theatre with no time for a brew, gone like a shot out like a light before I could refuse. I open me eyes to bright white, and me side still aches a bit. That's supposed to go away in heaven, so I guess I must have lived. Me son, he sits across from me as concerned as his mother, who passed over 20 years ago. I thought we were off to meet her. Still, my time ain't far away, and when it comes I ask that you bury me in me wellies. They're all I've ever known, and if there is an afterlife, I want to feel at home. The souls that need a shepherd, and they will flock to me, so bury me in me wellies, beneath the old yew tree. See, that's the only thing I've ever written that me father liked. I blame the Wurzels. But it's also his fault that we have this last poem in the collection. It might not be the last one I read, but it's the last one in the collection. And it's his fault this exists, because there's a certain amount of tedium that comes with farming. And I was never much good at the practical stuff. You know, I was usually used as a fence post or a gate to block sheep, or sent very far up the field, you know, given the tasks that people didn't really want, like raking molehills. And this one was a task that I was given, and it's called wool gathering. Dad sets a task to search the fields for wool, locate all the stray pieces, pack them into Hessian sacks. The hard part is done, he says. His calloused hands think nothing of gorse or barbed wire. Anywhere the stray white frays get caught, I set out. I pick through sheep muck and thick mud for mere wisps of wool, memories of wool, shreds, the dregs, barely feathers of wool. Press them amongst the full coats. Feel the wax of lanolin. And I leave things there with Shepherd's Delight, just because I thought we can't do everything about farming. I'll end with the poem that saw the end of this collection, really. And I never knew how I was going to end it until this poem came along. And it became entirely different from what I had been writing with Shepherd's Delight, and has seen more of the storytelling that I'd done with my other books come to the fore. And when I wrote this, I realised that Shepherd's Delight was done as a collection, and also it didn't feature any mutilation of animals. It was nice, it was quaint, it was about people. And so I thought I'd end things with the poem that saw the end of that collection, which is Spring Fever. Daniel spends his Sunday building a shed, invites the lads around, plans to pay them in pizza and beer like the old days, but Phil's concerned about his cholesterol and Mickey's watching his weight. There's a touch of spring fever in the air. Chaps chatter with one another, a squirrel skitter over fence posts, and Daniel is thrilled because he gets to use his hammer. Purchased when he was still Danny, hadn't yet become a package deal with Linda and the kids. They're often some jaunt with her parents, so he gets an entire day in the garden. Doesn't have to think about spreadsheets and workplace training on what constitutes sexual harassment these days. Instead, him and the lads reminisce. Install side panels with staples, recall halcyon days, drain pipes on 28-inch waists, knee tremblers in telephone boxes, the way Mad Dog Shuttleworth ate glass until his stomach ruptured. Now it's all Gant t-shirts and bootcut jeans. Sex on a school night is a wet dream and beer ain't worth the hassle of indigestion. An afternoon of sweat, splinters and soda water sees the shed finished. A man cave that Daniel has dreamt of since the third child. He admires their handiwork. Thanks to lads. I'll buy you a drink sometime, he says. Puffs out his chest, cock of the walk feels masculine. Within a fortnight, the kids claim the shed, and Daniel sets his eye on another new project. So yes, that poem there, that character there, was what helped see the end of Shepherd's Delight, my first poetry collection, and hopefully not the last. But what I will say is thank you to Artistic Echoes for having me. It was great to get to share some poetry with you this evening. And I suppose, until next time, that is all.